I knew something was wrong the moment I stepped outside because my son, a fully trained Navy SEAL, was standing perfectly still in the driveway while a fake HOA cop had a pistol aimed right at his face. Not shaking, not warning, not thinking, aiming. And my son, he didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't even shift his weight. He just looked at the man like he was already done. I froze halfway down the porch steps, heartbeat thundering in my ears. The late afternoon sun, catching on the barrel, pointed at my son's forehead. The fake cop barked, "On your knees now! You're in violation of community security code." My son cut him off quietly. "You're pointing the wrong gun at the wrong man." The fake cop's face twitched. Panic, ego, and confusion all crashing together. Before we dive in, comment which country you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. It started 3 days earlier. A brand new HOA president, Cynthia Marsh, had recently taken over our neighborhood. A woman who believed authorities should be loud, petty, and backed by fear. She hired a private enforcement officer, a man named Brent Cooper, who had the body language of a mall cop and the ego of a man who watched too many tactical YouTube videos. His vest said HOA cop, but his attitude said, "Wannabe cop who finally found a costume that made him feel tall." He started small. A warning for my mailbox being non-uniform. A citation for my truck being too rugged for a suburban street. Another warning for my hydrangeas growing past acceptable symmetry. Ridiculous, but whatever. I tossed the papers. The next day, my son came home on leave, not in uniform, just in jeans and a t-shirt, looking exhausted and ready for peace. He'd been deployed for 9 months. All he wanted was coffee and sleep. But Brent didn't like him. Not the build, not the quiet confidence, and especially not the fact that my son parked his motorcycle in our driveway. Something Brent insisted was an HOA violation. My son only said 4 words. "Talk to my father." But Brent wasn't used to anyone telling him no. Power had rot in it, and he'd been drinking it too fast. On the second day, he showed up to inspect our backyard gate. No warning, no knock. Just walked right in. He tried to give my son a citation. My son simply said, "This is private property. Step back out." Brent didn't like that either. His face went red. His hand shook. His voice cracked when he tried to act tough, but instead of backing down, he escalated. He followed my son to the driveway, ranting about enforcement authority and compliance laws. That's when he made the mistake that turned this from petty HOA drama into a life or death situation. He reached under his vest and pulled out a pistol. Not a toy, not a prop, a real firearm, and he aimed it deliberately at my son's face. The world froze. My stomach dropped. My blood turned to ice. And my son, he didn't even raise his hands. He just stared at Brent with the kind of stillness only men who've been under fire understand. Which brings us right back to the moment everything went to hell. "Drop it," my son warned softly. But Brent's knuckles only tightened. And that was the last decision he made. Brent's pistol stayed locked on my son's face, the barrel trembling just enough to show he wasn't half as confident as he pretended to be. My son didn't blink, didn't breathe any faster, didn't show a single drop of fear. Meanwhile, my Ring camera mounted under the porch light caught every second of Brent's meltdown. From the moment he stormed onto my driveway to the instant he drew a gun like a child playing soldier. Later, that footage would end up saving us all a lot of paperwork. But right then, all I could think was, "Dear God, don't move. Don't let this idiot pull the trigger." Brent's voice cracked as he tried to sound in control. "Drop to your knees," he barked again. "You're resisting HOA enforcement." My son exhaled once. Slow, calm. "You're shaking," he said quietly. Brent flinched. "What?" "You're shaking so hard," my son continued, voice barely above a whisper. You pull the trigger, it won't be on purpose. You don't want that on your conscience. I said, get down. My son tilted his head, studying him. You ever point a gun at someone trained to take it from you? Brent swallowed, Adam's apple bobbing like a nervous school kid. I'm warning you. No, my son said gently. I'm warning you. I could practically feel the temperature drop. My son wasn't bragging. He wasn't threatening. He was stating a fact. But Brett wasn't listening. Fear had turned his brain to mush. One more command, Brent said, voice breaking, and I will consider you a hostile subject. Hostile, my son repeated softly. For standing still in my own driveway. Brent's stance wobbled, his knees slightly buckled, his grip tightened dangerously. My son saw it the same moment I did. The moment a scared man becomes a stupid man. I whispered, Son, don't. But my son lifted one hand slowly, palm outward to calm me. Dad, he said without looking away, just keep breathing. Then he spoke to Brent, voice like stone. Lower the weapon. Last warning. But Brent's pride wouldn't let him. He jabbed the pistol forward a few inches, like a child lunging with a stick. I said, drop, and that's when he noticed it. The tiny blue glow from the Ring doorbell. Recording, documenting, capturing everything in crystal clarity. Brent's face drained white. Is that camera on? He asked, voice tiny. My son nodded. It's been on. Brent's breathing turned frantic. Oh God. Oh God. No. 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 I didn't mean I'm just enforcing. He backed up one step, panic spiraling. I stepped off the porch slowly. My son lifted a hand, still calm, still steady. Dad, stay back. Brent's eyes darted between us. His gun wavered, his breath hitched. He was unraveling. I'm in charge here. Brent snapped desperately. I'm the authority. You're a trespasser pointing a gun at a Navy SEAL, my son said, voice low. And you're running out of bad decisions. Then Brent made the worst decision of his life. He lunged forward fast, sloppy, panicked, hand reaching for my son's collar like he thought he could force him down. My son didn't step back, didn't dodge. He simply moved. One quick twist, one sharp pivot, one clean strike, and suddenly the gun wasn't in Brent's hand anymore. It was in my son's hand. And Brent was stumbling backward, eyes wide, realizing what had just happened. He backed into the gravel, palms raised, voice trembling. Wait. We can talk. Just don't shoot. But the damage was already done, because now my son had the weapon. And Brent finally understood who he'd threatened. If you're enjoying this HOA story so far, like and subscribe, because the story is only going to get better. Brent's panic turned wild. Not scared anymore. Cornered. And cornered men do the dumbest things God ever witnessed. My son held his gun steady, center mass, breathing slow. That calm, controlled breathing, only a Navy SEAL knows. His stance didn't move an inch. Don't, he warned. But Brent wasn't thinking. Sweat poured down his face, his fake badge dangling crookedly on his chest. His eyes darted from the gun to me and back again. Then I saw the moment it happened. The stupid idea, the survival instinct of a coward. His brain whispered, hostage. And Brent lunged, not at my son. He lunged toward me, hands out, trying to wrap his arm around my neck. He thought if he took me as a shield, he could force my son to drop the gun. Biggest mistake of his life. He barely got halfway. Dad, move! My son barked. I shifted right just as Brent's fingers brushed my shirt. Bang! The shot cracked through the air, and Brent folded instantly, screaming, clutching his thigh as blood poured through his jeans. He dropped face first into the dirt, kicking, howling, trying to crawl, but going nowhere. You shot me, he wailed, voice breaking. My son didn't even blink. You tried to take my father hostage, he said, lowering his weapon, but keeping it trained. That's a death wish in any state. Brent whimpered, rolling to his side. You pointed a gun at me, my son said. You threatened my dad. You don't walk away from that. I pulled out my phone and dialed Sheriff Hobbs. He answered on the first ring. What happened? Fake HOA cop pulled a gun on my son, I said, then tried to grab me as a hostage. My son put a round in his leg. We need deputies and EMS. Sheriff Hobbs blew a breath out slow. Stay put. We'll be there in 5. And he was. 5 minutes later, sirens cut through the quiet fields. Dust kicked up along the long gravel road as 2 cruisers rolled in. Sheriff Hobbs stepped out first, tall, broad, steady, hand resting on his belt like he already knew the whole story. He walked straight to Brent, who was still crying into the dirt. Well, Hobbs murmured. Looks like somebody finally met the wrong Navy SEAL. My son lowered his weapon and set it on the porch rail. Hobbs inspected the wound. Through, he said. Painful, but he'll live. Brent whimpered. He shot me. Arrest him. Hobbs raised an eyebrow. You threatened a man's father, pulled a gun on a SEAL, and tried to take a hostage. Son, you're lucky you ain't in a body bag. While medics treated Brent, Hobbs turned to me. Anything happened before this? That's when we told him everything. The harassment, the fake badge, the threats, and the truth none of us expected. Cynthia Hargrove sent him. Hobbs exhaled. Figures. She's been dipping toes into trouble for months. Guess she finally fell all the way in. 3 days later, she did more than fall. She crashed. Deputies marched into the HOA office and arrested her on the spot for ordering Brent to apply pressure, using HOA funds to hire him and filing false reports. She screamed the whole time about community authority and presidential immunity. Didn't matter. Orange looks the same on every tyrant. Brent hospitalized first, then booked. Multiple felonies, no bail. A week later, the charges were official. Brent Coleman was charged with impersonating an officer, aggravated assault, attempted kidnapping, brandishing a firearm, sentenced to 11 years in state prison. HOA President Cynthia Hargrove was charged with conspiracy, hiring an unlicensed enforcer, misuse of HOA funds, sentenced to 4 years plus $19,000 restitution. And as for my son, he got a handshake from the sheriff and a quiet good shot. That night, my son stood beside me on the porch, hands in his pockets, staring at the quiet road. You all right? He asked. I nodded. You? He smirked. Yeah, he should be grateful I aimed for his leg. I laughed under my breath. And that's how one fake HOA cop learned the hard way. Never pull a gun on my son, and never ever try to use me as a hostage. The end.